So this dream kind of started off kind of in a, I believe I was on Earth. It was kind of a nighttime setting. I had heard bad news that a friend of mine was trying to win custody back of their child. At the time, I didn't really, because I mean, I'm kind of going through the same thing in real life myself, so I don't know if it has any connection to that. Um, but I was tasked. I don't know who really tasked me for this. But I just felt this need or this like someone had put a task on me that I was to gather a group of friends, a whole bunch of other people I did not know. For some reason, I was referring to them as the ragtag group of outcast Neanderthals. I don't know why. I think one of them was one of the people in the group was like 7 feet tall and just ginormous person. I think that's where the Neanderthal thing came from. But I was tasked into herding everyone together, gathering as a group, and we were going kind of, I guess, an adventure is the best way to put it. Um, an adventure to work our way to the courtroom because we were, for some reason, supposed to show up. Um, the help the judge to decide on their decision to try and sway the judge to favor our friend to get custody of their child. One of the people in the groups called us legal animals. I whatever the hell that meant. Um, the adventure took us struggling through. Initially, it was kind of a nighttime, dark environment. We were riding on or inside. It was like a van, but like a pickup truck at the same time, even though it had like a bed on it. But when you're in the bed, you were like inside as if it was a van. It was really unusual. Um, we were just packed in there like mules in a barn, like sardines almost. As we're traveling across this night landscape, we're mainly on the road or some sort of road. Just kind of think countryside road. It wasn't, just average road. Um, we're just kind of swerving in and out. The landscape is varies between large flowing fields, and dense forested areas. Think like hilly areas with kind of like you would see like kind of like where I'm at in Kentucky. A lot of the farmlanders like these kind of rolling hills. They're not mountains or anything, but fairly prominent hills. There's really no flat land around here. So we're kind of like driving through this, a whole bunch of ups and downs, twists and curves. Um, uh, everything was still predominantly dark. Um, we would occasionally kind of run in some hitches here and there, roadblocks, whether it would be like a tree in the road or there was like a pothole. There's this one instance that we drove upon this pothole that was like the size of a baseball. I mean, not even an issue for a vehicle. In fact, not even half the size of the width of a tire. But for some reason, it was a big deal. We stopped. We all kind of like tumbled out of like clowns out of a little clown car, and just kind of gathered around it and stared. And we were discussing how we were going to get around this obstacle. We weren't sure if the truck van thing could get past it. So we're trying to figure out ways to drive around it versus over it. Which in hindsight didn't make any sense since it was such a tiny hole. One of our friends just ran off into an open field. On either side of the road, there was a very old looking wall. It was only like 3 feet high or something like that, 3 or 4 feet at the tops. Um, Made out of rock. Something you would see back in like the Middle Ages type era. Really worn down, old. It had obviously been there for a very long time. But they came climbing back over towards us onto the road, and they just had a handful of grass. For some reason, he handed out wads of grass to every one of us, and each handout he'd give us was equivalent to what he had in his hand, which didn't make sense at the time at all, that somehow it was multiplying itself. And we each took turns shoving it into this little hole that honestly was only big enough that a single wad of this grass would have filled it up. But we all seemingly were able to just stuff it in there. We felt accomplished for some reason, and kind of just shoved ourselves back into the van and started the van back up and very slowly inched forward. For some reason, we were very cautious, not specifically of the pothole, but on either side of us, since it was dark and there's this kind of open rolling hill farmland around us. Everybody was acting nervous, as if something was going to come charging out of the dark at us. I wasn't. I just, for some reason, I just didn't care. But everyone else was hyper focused on that. I'm not sure who was driving. I wasn't quite in the front seat. I was like, as if there was like those older style vehicles from like the 80s that had like the big bench seats in the front. I remember those being comfy as a kid. I was kind of sitting in the center position on that, but like slightly back, but not all the way in the back. We just kind of inched forward, got past that, and everyone's kind of tension died down. We continued to travel. There was a few other bumps and roadblocks on the road. One instance, someone fell off of the back of the truck. I think his name was Jerry. I don't know him from anywhere. Several of the people in the vehicle with me I actually know in some way or somehow in real life or through some of the other groups that I play video games with occasionally. He kind of bounced out the back, and we turned off the road to go after them because they were rolling down a hill, but bouncing like a basketball. It was odd, and next thing you know, we're kind of off-roading down towards their direction. It was kind of like a high anxiety type situation. At this point, even I'm feeling anxiety, like, as if we're having issues trying to catch up with them. But for some reason, we really couldn't, even though we're in a vehicle that was somehow off-roading really well with no issues. We got to a point that he just kind of disappeared off into the darkness. We all had a moment of discussion trying to decide what we're going to do. And Jessie, who is somebody I know in real life, well, I hadn't spoken to her in about 10 years, was talking about Jerry who fell off, but then wasn't calling Jerry by the name I knew them, but for some reason described to them instead of naming them. And she very specifically said that one old feller with the white beard who was being lazy or just without care decided to roll into the darkness. And for some reason, everyone around me just started nodding their heads. To me, they didn't feel right for some reason. I just felt that was kind of an odd thing to say about Jerry, because that's not what Jerry looked like. And just the way everybody just kind of accepted it, just kind of, I don't know, it was weird. But from this point on in the dream, I just kind of felt slightly disconnected from everyone in some way, as if just kind of like a false experience of some sort. So at this point, Will just kind of climbs back into the vehicle, and I don't remember the next part, but next thing I know, we're driving down the same road, but we're kind of exiting a wooded area, very heavily wooded, honeysuckle everywhere. There were eyes watching us all over the place from the darkness. But as we pass out of this into the opening, we could see in the distance there was the sunrise was occurring. So the sun was coming up in the distance. And we could see tall buildings, skyscrapers, a whole bunch of smaller buildings, suburbs and stuff around a large city. We just keep driving, and it was kind of like in a blink of an eye. I closed my eyes to blink, and next thing I know, we arrive in a futuristic city. Very advanced looking, and we're just sitting in front of an advanced looking courthouse. I guess it's the only way I can explain it. Think like Future. I don't know if anyone has seen the TV show Futurama, where they have like the little travel tubes everywhere and like float rings and stuff on stuff. It looked futuristic. Um, the courthouse itself, just for some reason, I get maybe it was like an artificial intelligence. But it was passing judgment on each one of us. For some reason, we're lining up the front door. It kind of felt like it was scanning us one at a time. First, the first person in line would get scanned, they would be judged, and they'd move in, and then it'd repeat for the next, as if it was alive somehow. It was choosing who could enter the courthouse. Not really weighing like, I guess like a religious aspect would be like the weight of your soul or something like that. No, it was just like weighing our mass, whatever the heck that means. In the end, we were all permitted to enter. Once we passed through the grand front doors, there were like tall golden doors. They were probably about 3 stories tall, maybe 10 feet wide each. It was a double door entry. Very elaborate with all these crazy patterns. There was a lot of eyes with sharp right angles around them over the place, and I think, not entirely sure, but along the bottom side, near where the door meets the floor, looked like it was kind of like ruler shaped or something like that. It had tick marks on it and numbers as if it was like a measuring device. Maybe that was part of the judging system to determine whether or not we could enter. But as we enter through the doors, we're immediately in the courtroom. It's just kind of like a scene skip immediately, like the in between didn't exist. The court proceedings immediately began to occur. The judge began entering initial statements of the case, specifically what it was about, who the defendants and who the accuser was. It was specifically about the lady that wants her child back, who was the friend that I gathered everyone together to go to court with to support her and try winning the judge's decision over. From this point, things got a little weird, well, weirder than what it already was. The court was discussing the kind of rules of engagement as if it was going to be combat of some sort, which none of that actually happened, really. Was talking about the lady whose child we were in court for, and then the individual who had the child that she wanted to take it from. But it was focusing on the child, and the court made it obvious that the child was a cow, not a human child. This is kind of dream state. For some reason, I didn't really find any weirdness with it. But after multiples back and forth between the judge, our friend who was trying to get the child back and the one that's trying to keep it, it was kind of like a TV show where it would, between sentences, a character speaking, it would zoom in on their faces, and that's all you would see is them as they talk. It suddenly zoomed in really close to the cow's face, as in like macro. It like took up your entire vision, 3D depth, crazy stuff, and it mooed at us, just mood. But it kind of mooed at us in anticipation, as if it was awaiting the outcome of the court proceedings. The woman we're there for, she began to cry out very emotionally, trying to defend why she deserved her child back. None of the details she was speaking of really made any sense to me. It was just gibberish, as if I was there, but not quite there. After she gives her side of the story, trying to explain to the judge why she deserves her child back, the judge says we cannot proceed any further without all present. We all just kind of pause and start looking around, confused. The judge isn't saying any more at this point for a bit, and we're just crying as if we're kind of left up to figure out what the judge is meaning. None of us can really quite figure it out. But then the judge says we are missing a person that was required to be here. And upon the judge saying that, it all dawned on us. We had lost that old bearded guy out in the field who just kind of rolled and bounced away into the darkness. So at this point, everybody just kind of stops and looks at me, as if I'm the one who has to solve the issue. So I inherently stood up from my seat, walked out through the rear doors. As I left the rear doors, I was back outside onto the street, as if there's really no transition point. And a portal opened in front of me. I kind of gestured my hand and I don't know, I guess it was kind of like a portal. It was like this shimmering mass of kind of blue, green, and reddish colors. I would kind of duck my head into it, and I would be in a different world. I'm just kind of glancing around and pull my head back out, and then I'd open another portal, kind of dip my head back in it again. I'm looking around as if I'm looking for the person that did not make it with us to the courthouse. I finally opened one last portal. It's like the same city, but in a more dystopian future. It's still technologically advanced, but it's just kind of more trashy. It's not clean, unkempt. And I had this kind of inner sensation that the person I was looking for is here. I entered through the portal from there and immediately was kind of in a four-way intersection in the middle of the city. Courthouse wasn't anywhere nearby, but there were tall buildings, like a couple skyscrapers, some others that were probably like, I don't know, 10 stories tall or something like that. And there, on the edge of the intersection, there's this car. It's futuristic. It looks like it's a hover car, but just kind of like turned off and on the ground, a little bit run down. For some reason, I sense I need to check in there. And I open the back door to the car that's sitting there, and inside the car is the lazy old man with the gray beard sleeping away. For some reason, I'm feeling kind of a sense of agitation, as if Why are you here? Why did you bounce away from us? We needed you. I awake him, and he is a bit surprised and kind of sits up. I tell him that I've come for him. He is late for showing up to the court, as if he was required to be there, and he acts even more shocked, not realizing how much time had passed since he kind of like departed from us in the dark kind of fields that we were before. He slowly leaves the back seat of the car, pulling himself out the side door of the car, and he just kind of stretches, yawns nonchalantly, doesn't have a care in the world type response at this point. And off in the distance, we kind of hear this large rumble and roar. It was kind of like a boss fight situation. Off in the distance was this giant centipede-like creature flying through the air in between the buildings and up above. It's just hurtling brown balls of sticky gunk over the place. Like, I don't know, I guess it was attacking something. I'm not entirely sure. But for some reason, I reach my hands out, and like if something in the distance, you can make like a little box between like both your index and thumb fingers, and kind of picturing it in between it like in a frame, making it look smaller. And the old bearded guy does the same thing, and at the same time, we just start shrinking that box between both of our index and thumb fingers till it's nothing. In the centipede that's kind of flying around through the air, this thing was massive, by the way. It was like, I don't know, it was probably like a mile long. It was huge. It just stops in midair and starts falling apart segment by segment, starting with its rear side. One segment would just fall, and then the next and the next, kind of like a domino effect. At this point, I guess we defeated the boss. I don't know what that actually meant. And then I open another portal back, and the old guy follows me. Before I thought he was Jerry, maybe it was someone else. I don't know, but it didn't look like Jerry. Just old bearded guy. We portal back to the courtroom, and as we enter the courtroom, the judge is already making his judgment on who's going to get custody of the child, which is a cow for some reason. The woman we were there to defend and to convince the judge to hand the child back over to her, she won the judgment. The judge already made his decision without us actually being there, even though before I went on this extra kind of side adventure, as if it was required for this other fellow to be there to make that decision. So maybe the judge already had the decision. The second we entered, he immediately already had it predetermined. I don't know. But we all just start cheering in excitement. We won the case. We're all happy. She's extremely happy, and she's hugging her child. And I start noticing that I'm kind of like separated from everything. Not quite there, but I'm there, as if nobody realizes I'm there, but I'm kind of like still interacting with everything, but it's not reacting back. And I notice what the judge actually looks like. It's that creature that has occasionally been popping up in several of my dreams. That kind of tiger-like wolf dragon fuzzy hybrid thing. It has shown up in more dreams than I've shared. I only tend to pick the ones that stand out the most. Otherwise, I'd talk all of your ears off endlessly. But he's just kind of staring at me, and I felt this kind of like tingle shock up my spine. And he just says, and kind of his voice just drowns out all their cheering and noise in the courtroom. Looking me in the eye, he just says, "They have a biscuit smooth as dawn." And immediately, as the last syllable on dawn ended, coming from his mouth, my alarm went off and woke me up. And for some, I don't know why. That's a weird statement. They have a biscuit smooth as dawn. I thought about it the entire day because I just thought it was the weirdest thing I've heard. In timing too, since it literally happened right as my alarm went off. And from there, that's pretty much the end of my dream.